Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Coach and Benway podcast. I am your co-host, Dr. Benway. My colleague, Coach Red Pill, or is it Blue Pill, or is it Black Pill now? I don't know. Depends on what attitude.
Depends on the mood.
Coach Mood Pill. Coach Mood Pill. So you and I have been, talking about, as per usual, various filmmakers, and we had told ourselves that Oliver Stone's a guy we really should probably talk about for a while. He's been on the periphery of a lot of things we kind of talked about.
Yeah.
I think he even came up for the fact that when I was doing my films of the summer of '82, I had mentioned that, oh yeah, by the way, Oliver Stone was one of the screenwriters on Conan, and we realized we probably should talk about him.
Yeah. I think that Oliver Stone is one of the most remarkable filmmakers in cinema history. I truly think that he's done some pictures that are indelible. And I think that in many ways he has altered the art form and integrated ideas that I don't think anybody else ever did or has done as successfully. And I'll get to it in specifically the use of different camera techniques and lighting and approaches to filmmaking and integrate them. And I'm thinking, of course, of Natural Born Killers. I think that he's just an incredible filmmaker, and yet at the same time, he's so fucking infuriating. He's a guy that drives me up the fucking wall, okay? He is dishonest, intellectually dishonest, historically dishonest. He's a dishonest guy. Yet at the same time, I recognize that all great artists are, at their core, charlatans. Great artists are basically fooling their audience into believing or thinking certain things. That's the whole point of art. And so he drives me up the wall, and yet I can't help but respect him as an artist, even as I think that a lot of his art, like JFK, is just so much bullshit. You know what I mean? And morally reprehensible. Yeah.
That was the example I was going to give, because it JFK perfectly exhibits the two feelings I have on Oliver Stone, which is I think JFK is a brilliant movie. I think it's one of the most effective movies I've seen. It's so compelling. It's one of those movies that if I see it on, I'm going to watch it all the way through.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, I know it's completely historical horse shit and it's all fucking bullshit.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
both thoughts exist in my head, and when I watch it, I'm aware of that, and it doesn't bother me. I just enjoy the movie. When I think on the movie beyond watching it, and someone says, "What do you think about what happened to JFK, and what do you think of Oliver Stone?" I said, Oliver Stone just flung all this shit to the fucking wall and said, "Whoa, some of it's gonna stick."
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. Look, you look at the at his filmography, right? He started as a writer, and a very good writer. He was the writer of Scarface, and I think that the Scarface, the 82, 82 was or 83?
83.
Yeah, 83 Scarface, and he worked in Conan the Barbarian, and Scarface, and
Midnight Express.
And Midnight Express, I'd forgotten that. Yeah, I'm looking at his list now. He's a great writer. There's no question about it. The guy is a great writer, and he has written some really compelling stuff. As a director, he was less than compelling at the start. Salvador was like a political movie, though it does have Jimmy Woods in a great role, right? And it's weird to think that James Woods, and Oliver Stone are friends, are like apparently good friends, and they are politically just diametrically opposed. Well, I don't know if they're still friends. I hope that they are.
Well, I think today, actually, they probably do share things, because Oliver Stone, he took the path I saw a lot of leftists took, which is they have sympathy for Trump because Trump is against the establishment that they hate. They hate it more than we do, or at least as much as we do.
Okay, well, be that as it may, the fact of the matter is that as a director, he was not very good. He got a lot of props for Platoon, but Platoon was.
I think it's the weakest Vietnam War movie. And of course, it's the one that won all the awards.
Yeah, it's the weakest Vietnam War movie. It doesn't hold a candle to Apocalypse Now, which is, I think that we can agree, is the sine qua non of Vietnam War movies, right? I mean, I don't think that Platoon comes even close to that. I don't think it comes close to Full Metal Jacket, which is an exceedingly flawed picture. But at least Full Metal Jacket, there isn't like a sentimentality. I mean, that's the thing about Platoon.
That was the thing that Stone is mostly missing for me as a filmmaker. Well, I'll get into what I think he comes really great. He lacks those moments of almost aesthetic reverie. By aesthetic reverie, it's like that the feeling when you're watching this film where it's just to use Edmund Burke's phrase, the sublime. It's like it's overwhelming how the images, the sound, and everything is working in such a way as to say this says something enrichingly valuable about reality or your consciousness or human condition, what have you. Platoon compared to Apocalypse Now and Full Metal Jacket, which do have those moments of aesthetic reverie. Platoon is just so fucking banal. It's just like paint by the numbers narrative and very simplistic imagery about like, oh, the soldiers who are stoners versus the soldiers who are beer drinkers. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where we're at. And I know people want to do about that one scene with the adagio for strings is like that one moment in Platoon. I actually think that's overwrought,
I don't
and
even
I like
remember
that
that
song.
scene. What was that one?
It's the scene after the village is burning, and they have like the adagio song playing, and everybody's sort of taking stuff from the village, and what's his face, Johnny Depp, is kind of just observing everything, and that's it's not even memorable just to describe it. I only am describing it because I remember the song playing over the scene. I think Platoon is a dull movie. It's a very dull movie.
It's banal. It's banal, but like mediocre in its banality. Yeah, I don't remember anything about it. I remember the scene of William Dafoe getting shot, right? And I remember watching it, and I was 19 when I watched it, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is fucking too much. It's not powerful. It's sort of like
Right.
just trying too hard, just trying too hard for like this one iconic image. And yeah, it was Oscar bait, okay? And he got Oscars. He got Oscar Best Picture and Best Director. I think Best Screenplay as well. But the odd thing was that the next picture he did, Wall Street, was much better. It was really much better. It was much
Mm-hmm.
better, much more complex, better storytelling, more confident direction. It was just a better picture. Uh,
What really is, and Wall Street isn't my favorite film of his, but it's the start of a theme that he carried through, which makes him compelling for me, which is Wall Street is the first of his movies which introduces his big bugaboo with his fathers and sons.
yeah,
So obviously the Martin Sheen and Charlie Sheen character for sure, but also that kind of father-son relationship that manifests elsewhere for Bud, who's Charlie Sheen's character, the guy early, lowly stock trader in Wall Street's looking for a father figure. Michael Douglas ultimately plays that role for him as well.
hmm
But even like the character that Hal Holbrook plays, when Bud is,
yeah,
just trading shitty stocks, and Hal Holbrook's like the older guy in the three-piece suit who's only working at the firm because he lost a lot of his millions and like whatever the last crash was, and he always has that fatherly wisdom, like the idea is like, when man looks into the abyss and the abyss stares back at him, that kind of stuff. I love that shit, and also I love Hal Holbrook because
yeah,
he just
yeah.
has
But
that perfect voice.
yeah, but it was so overly sentimental and stuff. Okay, okay. So you did what you call it? I'm looking at his filmography as a director. He does Wall Street, then he does Talk Radio, which I actually haven't seen.
Neither have I
Oh,
actually.
okay. So we can confidently skip that one.
Yeah.
But then he did Talk Radio. Wasn't with yeah, it was with Eric Bogosian. I I I don't have any opinion about it because I didn't see it, and I know at the time it wasn't. It was indifferently received. But Born on the 4th of July with Tom Cruise, right? That picture was not. It was starting to get adventurous, but it was going on with this Vietnam thing. It's really funny because he went to Vietnam. I mean, Oliver Stone was in Vietnam, and he was in the
Yeah.
tail end of Vietnam, and like the big push, the big surge up in 68, 69, right?
And he
Where,
was a grunt too. He didn't
yeah.
he didn't take the desk job, which could easily have gone his way given his family background and position,
hmm
class position. He wanted to be on the front line and he got it.
Yeah, I suspect also that part of the reason, though he has never admitted this, I think that part of the reason was he wanted to kill somebody. He wanted
Or
to.
get killed himself. Either way.
Either way, yeah, I think that probably you can tell that he's one of those callow young men who, at that time, at that age, would have been like, yeah, if I don't get to kill somebody, I'll be killed. Go out and blaze with
Yeah.
glory. something stupid like that.
Because you know what, John Milius was that way. John Milius wanted to go,
Yeah, but
and
John
he
Milius
did.
was honest enough to say that he wanted to go and kill
Yeah,
somebody.
the main reason I bring this up, both of those men are on the wrote the Conan screenplay,
Yeah.
and you could tell that both of those men wrote that screenplay. I just gotta
Yes.
say,
Yeah, yeah. The Conan screenplay. Yeah, I mean, Jesus Christ. You know, the testosterone in that writing room must have been like off the charts. You would have gotten
I
a
I
voice
don't
2 octaves deeper just from the smell. You know.
I don't know if they ever wrote it together. I know they got friendly-ish afterwards, but I couldn't. I
I don't know.
hope they had. I hope they had at least one session together because it's brilliant. I've seen them on stage together,
Hmm.
and you could tell it's not perfectly oil and water. You could tell one guy's clearly a right wing kook and one's a left wing kook, but there's enough kook between them to make sure that they bond. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, because also I get the sense, but this is purely subjective and perhaps projection on my part, but I get the sense that he's a left wing nut, but enough of a of a nut to self aware enough to know that he's kind of nutty, and so he doesn't take
Yeah,
the
yeah.
politics that seriously. Although he does inflict it on his fucking movies, and it's just
I
stupid.
know.
But anyway,
I know.
what's interesting is that Born on the Fourth of July was another sentimental Vietnam picture, and then he did The Doors, which it was like a biopic, but I don't even remember it. I mean, it just
I did see it. It's for a biopic. It's weird and in a good way. And it left us with the image of Val Kilmer chasing a naked Indian man through the desert because obviously the Doors had to have that, August
oh
Huxley
yeah,
Doors of Perception experience.
yeah, and
Yeah,
that's when he started with this whole Indian shaman shit that's gone through all of his pictures. Like he thinks that the Indians are like these shamanistic, the primitive people who have like a secret wisdom that us white Westerners don't really have.
that's another baby boomer thing. It's like they had a bad experience in the '60s, but then they dropped acid and read some Castellaneta books and suddenly realized, oh, the Yucca,
Yeah.
tribes have all the answers. Like, well, what happened to them? They died, but they had the answers.
Oh, by the way, did you hear of that shit that they found in Mexico City, of
Yeah,
that the
the
ruins,
platform of
the
skulls.
platform of skulls? Yeah, the Spanish did not conquer the Americas. Get it through your
They
fucking head.
liberated them.
They
They liberated it.
liberated the Americas from the fucking bloodthirsty savagery of these fucking people. Okay, these fucking Indians, all of them were fucking savages, and we Europeans imposed civilization on them. And you mark my words, when the white man is gone, the savagery will return. Yes, sir. You mark my words. But anyway, going back to Oliver Stone, yeah, he's got this obsession with the fucking Indians, right? And that the Indians are all wise and shit, right? And did it start at the Doors or earlier? Because I don't recall in his pictures it appearing before the Doors.
I guess you could kind of play this game with Salvador because you're still dealing with
No, but
Latin
yeah, but there was like
American.
the little brown people who were just fucking background. The movie was about what's his face. I don't think that there was. I don't recall there being. I saw these pictures so long ago.
I mean, I'm willing to bet it's mostly the Doors where the
Yeah,
shit because it's front and center in the Doors because it's Jim Morrison's spiritual journey.
yeah,
Whatever,
yeah. It's
it,
just
it. I mean, it's not a bad picture. I mean, there's enough scenes that I like in it. It's not the most memorable to me. We start getting into real. Ironically enough, because I think it's historically full of shit, you start getting into real filmmaking territory when you do JFK.
yeah. That's his next picture in '91, and JFK is okay. First of all, you got to admit that his partnership with Robert Richardson was just phenomenal. I mean, crazy director and crazy cinematographer, they fucking met. Because the lighting on JFK, and not like not even the flashy scenes, but also like the more normal quote unquote conventional scenes, they look fucking. I mean, that movie, the whole fucking thing, every fucking frame of it is beautiful. Okay.
Visually beautiful, and it has some of the best montages I've ever
Yeah.
seen. I mean, he's cutting between newsreel footage and film stock that he did in black and white with a Dutch angle to oversaturated
Yeah.
film stock to just natural film stock. It blends perfectly.
Yeah.
And talk about like a movie that's so perfectly cast as well.
Yeah.
Like Gary Oldman as
As
Lee
Lee
Harvey
Harvey
Oswald
Oswald.
is amazing. Tommy Lee Jones is that Clay Shaw, that
Yeah. Kevin
Louisiana
Bacon.
creepy gay guy. Yeah, Kevin Bacon's perfect. Oh, Kevin Bacon is a fucking R guy if like ever there was. It's like, I love what he says. It's like you're a liberal, Mr. Garrison, because you've never been fucked in the ass. Because fascism is coming back, he said it, and that makes me laugh to this day.
No, it's an incredible. And what's interesting is a lot of those actors at that time were sort of like down in the dumps. One of the things that you have to give Oliver Stone is that he always casts the right actor, irrespective of whether they're hot or not. And a lot of times he's gotten people that you wouldn't think would be right for a role, and it turns out retrospectively that they were perfect for the role. Like just skipping way ahead, Anthony Hopkins as Nixon. When I heard
Yeah,
that, I thought that's just fucking bad. That's just a bad casting call. And then I saw the picture, and I'm like, this kind of works. It
yeah.
actually
Anthony
worked better
Hopkins.
than
Yeah,
anybody else I could think of, to tell you the truth.
yeah. Anthony Hopkins and Stone recognized something very brilliantly, very quickly, which was if you try to do the Nixon impression,
You fail.
that's what people will remember. You will fail. Nixon, what he did is a Nixon impression,
Yeah,
which is to say, he understood or tried to capture the emotional resonance of what this guy was, and
yeah.
I think he thus created the absolutely perfect Nixon narrative. In fact, I actually say Nixon, for my money, is Oliver Stone's best movie.
Yeah, and that goes to something about Oliver Stone's filmmaking after The Doors, or starting with The Doors, I suppose, because it wasn't really present in Born on the Fourth of July, but this impressionism that is really remarkable because you start to feel as if his movies are not really they're impressionistic paintings, and I think that it's a self-conscious decision to move in that direction of just putting impressions on film as opposed to capturing reality. And I think that that's an extraordinarily effective thing. And I don't think of any other filmmaker, and that's why I think he's so important, because I can't recall offhand any other filmmaker who approaches film that way, of like deliberately saying, I'm not going to show you reality, I'm just going to show you impressions, and it will create the emotional impression on you. You see what I'm saying? What other filmmaker comes close to that?
I think Kubrick does do it on occasion,
I
and
so disagree. I feel as Kubrick is in the Fincher school of pure objectivity.
no, I no. Kubrick is not an objective filmmaker for my money. No, no. The Shining is not objective, not at all. But that's yeah, we've had that
Okay,
debate.
yeah,
That's
let's
not
skip
here
that.
nor
But
there.
like David Lynch, for instance, David Lynch, that's another one who's like you could say is
Yeah. Oh yeah,
impressionistic.
for sure. That's David. That's David Lynch's impression of the reality. Absolutely.
Yeah, but here's what's interesting is that Oliver Stone is that his use of cutting and of different camera angles and looks uh, is more deliberate. It, it's
Yes.
it's much
Yes.
more deliberate than Kubrick or David Lynch. Okay, let me grant you, for the sake of argument, that you're right that Kubrick is an impressionistic filmmaker. Oliver Stone never does tracking shots ever. He doesn't do any fucking tracking shots. They're always just cutting. And the thing is, what's interesting is that he talks so much about MTV and how MTV was so important. I think that he's the only filmmaker who understood MTV cutting, that that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of
That's right.
rapid fire cutting. Nobody else understood it. But going back to it, he never uses a tracking shot. He never uses a long moving take of any kind. Or I can't recall any of the last. I don't know, since JFK. Can you recall offhand any shot like that?
I think he does have a shot in Nixon where he tracks Nixon. But
It would be
that's
a
I.
one-off. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a one-off. Yeah.
Okay, let me phrase it. We can recall a dozen tracking shots that Kubrick used. We can recall a dozen tracking shots or long panning shots that Woody Allen used. But I can't recall offhand a single long shot from Oliver Stone. He all about the little flash of just a few seconds, and not
Hmm.
necessarily of the object of the scene, but often is not the little objects, things of the scene. Like for instance, I'm thinking of Natural Born Killers at the beginning of the movie. The intro shot, the intro scene is black and white, but there are these pops of color that flash on the key lime pie, for instance, that bright, oversaturated key lime pie shot, right? And it just gives you this impression, this burst of emotion,
Yeah.
that is just splashed and then cuts to something else. That's remarkable. That's incredibly
Well,
difficult to do.
and my favorite scene in Nixon does the same thing. And it's funny enough, it was not in the theatrical version; it was cut. You can see it in every version you buy, though.
Yeah.
When Nixon talks to Helms, who at the time was the head of the CIA,
Hmm.
and it's basically Nixon just trying to get the information out of Helms about what do you fucking know about the Cuban shit and everything else that can be traced back to us. And Helms is attending to his orchids, and they have an existential conversation about the evils that men do, and there's a reference to Yeats's poems, and in the the flower scene, it's like Nixon's like, I can't stand the flowers, they smell of death, and it cuts immediately to a black and white shot of his brothers dying, all of them dying young
Mm.
and whatnot. And then there's also a scene where, as Helms is attending to the flowers, he's snaking around them like a snake, and there's a shot where he looks at the camera and his eyes are just completely black, like again, it's an impressionistic, like, this is the serpent in the garden kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah.
And Stone does, and that's when I say Stone starts getting into, like I said, that aesthetic reverie. That scene in particular, he gets it there, but it took him a while to mature to that point.
Yeah. You can argue that Oliver Stone is Norman Mailer of film.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe.
Very existential, you know, and going for the impressionistic instead of the perfectly real. Okay. Because, like, for instance, Armies of the Night, for example, it's impressionistic.
Oh yeah.
There's that vibe to it, right? So anyway, for me, the pinnacle is not Nixon, though. I have to admit, I haven't seen Nixon since it came out. Uh, I thought it was okay at the time, but for me, the big one was Natural Born Killers. I always thought that was
Hmm.
a picture that was like the artistic pinnacle of his impressionism. And this is going to be I'm going to blow your mind right here. The other picture that I think is technically among the most accomplished pictures ever made is Any Given Sunday, the football movie.
Yeah.
It's an absurd and ridiculous picture. It's about fucking football, and it's just stupid, okay? But it is technically, in terms of editing, in terms of cinematography, even in terms of acting, it's an extraordinary picture. And by the way, what's her face? Cameron Diaz. That was the best movie she ever did. She should have gotten a Best Supporting Oscar out of that picture because she was so fucking good. She chewed Al Pacino alive. She chewed on his bones and then like smacked her lips and tossed the bones over her shoulder. She just ate up that movie. She was unbelievably good in that picture. But anyway, that's just a side note. Because I always thought that
No, no,
Cameron
I
Diaz,
get it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
could have been such a great actress because she had the chops. She most definitely had the chops. And it just seems sort of like a tragedy that she didn't go in that direction. You know what I'm saying? But anyway, for me, Natural Born Killers highlights both Oliver Stone's incredible achievements as a director, the stylistic notion of impressionism, and at the same time his failures as an artist. Because see,
Yes.
there's this great scene in Natural Born Killers that he cut. Okay, it's a scene in the courthouse where one of his victims, or the sister of one of his victims, I think, is testifying, and the character of Woody Harrelson, right, is his own lawyer, right, and he murders her in the courtroom, very viciously and barbarically, and it's an amazing scene. It's beautifully shot. He uses like this very wide angle lens. Okay, I'd venture to say it was like a 12 millimeter lens or something like that, or maybe 15 at most. It was like really fucking wide, almost fisheye. And the Woody Harrelson character, what's his name, Mickey, he kills the Ashley Judd character. But here's the thing: see, when you watch the scene, see, it's clear that what he did to her was evil, and her performance is so powerful and compelling and naturalistic that there's no other way to look at the Woody Harrelson character as anything other than the embodiment of pure evil, of just an evil man. And then he goes and kills her, which is even worse. And what I realized was that Oliver Stone cut it not because of pacing, as he said, or bullshit like that. He cut it because it made Mickey and Mallory unsympathetic. You watch that scene, and all of a sudden you're like, it like breaks the spell because the whole movie, you are in love with Mickey and Mallory. You think that they're so cool. and they're doing all this crazy shit and shooting up people and shooting up, bicyclists who are just randomly passing by and just, wreaking havoc. And they're so cool. But then he kills this poor girl who had suffered enough. And you see her suffering. And then he kills her on top of it with a pencil, I think, or something like that. And you're like, it breaks the spell. And that's when I realized when I saw that scene, it made me reevaluate the entire picture and realize that what Oliver Stone had very successfully done was that he had propagandized me into thinking that Mickey and Mallory were the good guys when they are two evil people. They are evil people. And Natural Born Killers is morally an indefensible picture because it glorifies evil. It glorifies murder. There's no other way to look at it. And it's that scene that he cut, and smart that he cut it, that would have given the whole show away and shown that his position is morally vacuous. And that's the thing about Oliver Stone, that he is fundamentally, at his core, I think it seems to me, a morally empty guy. He does not know the difference. No, let me rephrase that. He knows the difference between right and wrong, and chooses to glorify evil. Does this make sense?
Well, here's the thing. I agree with you about the movie. I don't know that I agree with you about Stone, and I'll explain why, because it's my relationship to this film, which is if I had seen this film at the time, I would have been less than 10 years old. But if I would have watched it at that kind of impressionable time, I probably would have enjoyed it more, like a la, Pulp Fiction. But I only came to it after the fact that I started my questioning of Quentin Tarantino.
Mm-hmm.
Tarantino at a very fundamental level. Like I thought there was something, just fundamentally empty about what he was doing. And I look back on that film, independent of the fact that the story comes from Quentin Tarantino, just go to the fact that it's from that period and has that tone. I always looked at it askance for reasons you kind of mentioned, like it's kind of vacuous and it's that kind of fuck everything, violence is okay attitude. But I don't know that that feels like Oliver Stone's doing as much as, it's the material itself. And if the extent that, funny enough, the story is from Quentin Tarantino, it becomes complicated in my mind as what's fairly Stone or not, because I think when you do look at, like I said, his JFK and his Nixon and movies like that, I think he's a lot clearer on the moral issue. Like you said, I think he does know right and wrong. I think in those films, even if he makes up the fucking history, like in JFK, I think he fundamentally gets the core moral attitude to take. So I think that this is a byproduct of that particular time. So it's hard for me to disassociate from that. But I agree with you fundamentally on the film. There's something just disgusting about the film.
Yeah, yeah. And yet at the same time, it's technically a masterpiece. Performances are extraordinary. And there are so many memorable scenes in it. So many memorable moments that you're like, wow, this really blows me away. Like the prison riot, for instance.
Yeah.
It's just amazing, you know?
And that's my response to Quentin Tarantino often, by the way. I recognize the technical artistry that goes into it. I think the movies are a joke, though.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. Uh, um, my appreciation of Tarantino, we're going to have to do an episode on Tarantino at some point, because my appreciation of Tarantino has changed quite a bit since he came on the scene, because I watched him come on the scene. I saw Reservoir Dogs before Pulp Fiction had come out, when it was like running, when Reservoir Dogs was the first thing he'd put out. I saw it in college, and I was like, wow, this is a great picture. This guy really knows what he's doing. At the time, I remember thinking that, didn't this guy come from like the theater, some shit like that? Because it seemed very much like a play at the time,
Right. Yeah.
much more than a movie. And so later, I was sort of surprised when people say, "Oh, he was like such a movie geek and stuff like that." I thought, man, this guy seems like he's watched a lot of theater, and is more filming a play. Because it reminded me, Reservoir Dogs reminded me of Vanya on 42nd Street.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There was a thing about them that seemed very similar. But anyway, going back to Natural Born Killers and on Oliver Stone. Well, there's more of that Indian shaman shit, where they kill the Indian shaman, and that's supposed to be when they're committing evil. But yeah, it was just Natural Born Killers. I find it a brilliant movie. I think that there's so much to learn from it that impressionistic approach to editing and filmmaking, of using different color stocks and just different color schemes and the whole thing, um, that I've actually tried to copy, much less success, of course. But I think it's something really interesting. And what's interesting to me is that so few filmmakers followed in that path. That I find extraordinary. That it's such a clear path and such an interesting path, and very few filmmakers followed that path. I don't know if it's perhaps because of the expense of it, because it takes a long goddamn time to edit a picture like that. Okay, it took Stone over a year to edit Natural Born Killers. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's just an issue of the expense of editing. But I mean, then again, editing is not an expensive process, but it does take so much time, and perhaps that time becomes an issue insofar as recouping the investment on a picture. But because usually a picture is edited, it doesn't take that long to edit a picture. You can get it done for a standard feature length picture in anywhere between 2 and 4 months, depending. But I mean, if you really push it and you have a couple of editing teams working simultaneously, you can definitely get a picture done in 2 months, no question. So, so yeah, I'm unclear as to why more filmmakers have not followed in those footsteps. What do you think?
Opportunity costs. If you spend a lot of time editing, that is all that less film you could be filming
No,
elsewhere.
actually, let me rephrase that. That doesn't hold water, because pictures today, the average shot length is a lot shorter than back in 20, 30, 40 years ago. Okay, it's been, because people tend to be, quicker shots, Michael Bay kind of, Bayhem kind of thing, of like constant shots, constant cutting, right? So it's not an issue. Now that I think about it and talking out loud, I'm realizing it has nothing to do with time. It's that stylistic approach to different film stock and being impressionistic. Other filmmakers don't do it, and it's such a promising direction. You can get so much out of it. You know, and they don't seem to do it. I don't quite understand why not. Because is there any filmmaker who's following in Oliver Stone's path?
In the exact way he did, no. I do know. I mean, in terms of like different film, well, it's not necessarily stocks, but at least image dimensions. There's an example I could think of. The Grand Budapest Hotel by
One,
Wes
one,
Anderson
yeah, yeah,
does use that. Yeah,
one picture, right?
yeah, one. Yeah,
Yeah, and nowhere near as aggressively as Natural Born Killers.
it's
Or,
yes, it's very subtle.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got Natural Born Killers. I don't remember U-Turn. It was that Sean Penn picture.
Yeah, I never. I mean, that's the other thing I have to admit about Oliver Stone. It's like for a filmmaker I actually like to pay attention to. It's not surprising that like half of his films I don't remember actually ever seeing, and I feel like I'm not at a loss for not seeing them. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so I've never seen Heaven and Earth. Is my day that much worse?
No,
Is my artistic impression that much worse? No, and
no.
I don't even feel the need to watch it. There's like a lot of his movies like that.
Yeah. Well, here's what's interesting. Then we got Any Given Sunday, which was clearly a picture to make money, a commercial picture. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, you got to make money. You need a chunk of change. You need a big chunk to pay off the house and stuff. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's sort of naive to expect artists to only do masterpieces and not sometimes have to worry about the grubby business of keeping body and soul together. So him doing Any Given Sunday for the money, I don't have a problem with that. I think it's a great picture. I think Any Given Sunday, like I said, technically incredibly accomplished. He has some more of that Indian voodoo bullshit. But here's what's interesting about that picture. Uh, this was the first picture that Jamie Foxx did that was serious. He was incredibly good. Every single performance in this picture is brilliant. I mean, do you recall this picture? I don't know if you even saw it.
No, I do. No, I do. It's one of my parents would always watch it whenever it was on. So yeah, I recall it. Yeah, I mean, well, that's true for a lot of Oliver Stone films. He actually gets the performances out of people.
Yeah.
And funny because I never when you there's some directors when you pay attention to them, you think to yourself that guy's good with talking with people. This guy is not. Oliver Stone never really hit my list as I bet that's a guy who's really good at talking with people. But the thing is, all the performances in all of the movies I can think of have never been bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Every single one is on the money. And Jamie Foxx, as the quarterback, he's extraordinary. He's really good. And there's that brilliant scene where he's arguing with Al Pacino. What's interesting is that Al Pacino is feels that he is outclassed in every single scene. There's even a sense that Dennis Quaid, who plays an aging quarterback, is outclassing him in the acting department. You know what I mean? Because
Oh,
it's a
it's gotta
typical.
hurt for Al.
Yeah, because it's like in every scene, Al Pacino's playing, loud Al, like histrionic, hysterical
You're,
Al.
you're right. That's around the time. It's like around Heat and this is when we start getting the what do we got?
Yeah, exactly,
Al
exactly.
Pacino.
Yeah, that hysterical Al Pacino. There's a scene that it wasn't in the theatrical release, but it is in most of the video scenes of Elizabeth Berkley, a poor girl from Striptease. I
Yeah.
feel sorry for her, but I mean, poor girl, her career got blown out of the water because of fucking Paul Verhoeven and his desire to do like some weird, R-rated porno, but whatever the fuck. She delivers a brilliant performance as a hooker, as Mandy, and she's like a expensive hooker who has like this weird relationship with Al Pacino. It's just like a couple of scenes. I mean, I'm talking total screen time maybe 3 minutes, not in a movie that's 2.5 hours long. But it's so good, and everybody is brilliant in it. Like James Woods as the corrupt doctor. There's this brilliant montage of James Woods and Cameron Diaz. They're talking in the locker room of the stadium, right? And there's nobody around, and just the two of them, and they're talking. And it's incredible how Cameron Diaz holds her own, more than her own, with James Woods, who's like a big fucking deal, right? And the performances of both are incredibly naturalistic, and they're basically talking about the physical condition of two of the other characters. And the scene between James Woods' character of the doctor and Cameron Diaz's role as the football team owner, it's intercut with scenes of these two players. And it's brilliant montage, brilliant acting, brilliant everything, brilliant music, because there's like this low underground vibe to it. That's like a little like a bass, like it's like really low in the mix. Excuse me.
Hmm.
And but you hear it, and it gives like this tension. And these two characters are basically deciding the fate of these two other characters. And it's an extraordinary scene. I mean, it's really fucking amazing. It's so corporatist. It's so it understands the corporate mentality of professional sports. Because Stone was one of the co-writer on the script. He was obviously one of the main co-writers on the script. And there's that understanding of corporate nuance, and it's
Hmm.
so interesting. And uh, uh, like at one point, James Woods' character says, I'm not a total prick. I mean, the guy could genuinely get hurt. And you realize, yeah, he realizes what he's doing. He doesn't really want to get the guy hurt for no fucking reason, and he is warning her that the character, the football player, played by Lawrence Taylor, in a fucking brilliant performance, by the way, could potentially be seriously hurt by continuing to play football. And that scene fucking blows my mind. Okay, I know I've ranted on for too many minutes on this particular scene, but it's a scene that you watch it and you're like, first of all, you're just in the world. You don't feel that you're watching a movie. You feel in it. And after repeated viewings, you sort of like, okay, gain enough distance that you can step back and see what the guy is doing, Oliver Stone is doing. But it's still extraordinary. And the final line, they're talking, and Cameron Diaz, starts to walk away, and James Woods says after, so what do you want me to do? And she says, well, it's up to you, but what you help save us now won't be forgotten at contract time. It's just a fucking brilliant line and a brilliant performance, and it so perfectly encapsulates the whole corporatist mentality of professional sports as it is today. I'm okay. You rant about something because that's my favorite scene of Oliver Stone's pictures. I think.
Well, like I said, I had mentioned my favorite scene already, but what's interesting, as you mentioned about Stone, which frankly other filmmakers don't nearly do as well, and even though I disagree with him sometimes on his politics, he actually hits the big picture politics and social issues in his films better than others do. I mean, it's not like John Sayles or other left-wing filmmakers who just try to. I mean, Oliver Stone's certainly hitting you over the head a little bit, but at least there's artfulness to it. Those guys barely have any artfulness. It's the message. Oliver Stone is better skilled at getting the message and the art right together. And frankly, I think that's also not unrelated to the fact that you had mentioned that Oliver Stone's influence heavily. He's the one director who got MTV. I would also say he's the one director who got what Eisenstein was doing with montage. MTV and Oliver Stone are the two best students of Eisenstein, the Soviet filmmaker of Battleship Potemkin and all of the other early Soviet propaganda films. It's not surprising that Oliver Stone's politics and his art kind of lend itself to that. And I think, Any Given Sunday is a strong film, and I actually think it's the last film of his premiere period. Because if you think of what comes after Any Given Sunday, there's a bunch of films where it's just you could just see he's the director alone, and he's just probably just doing it as a job. And Alexander is his next, film that he really is heavily invested in. And that's a film I wanted to enjoy. And I still try to put effort in occasionally to enjoying it. And I can just see it as a failure. Funny, I had mentioned to you earlier that I was hard pressed to find, a bad performance in an Oliver Stone film until we get to Alexander. And,
That's
Colin Farrell just completely shits the whole thing.
I
He
think
shits the bed.
I think that Alexander is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I've watched it several times, and every time I watch it, it's like a little bit worse. I don't quite understand what the fuck happened. You know,
It's the performance, man. I mean, honestly, the performance.
no, the
And
script was
there's some
shit. I mean, yeah. I'm not arguing. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm saying that wasn't the only problem. I think the script was just absurd. It was idiotic. And the worst part is that Alexander's life was fucking fascinating. He was a political master. Everybody remembers him as being a great warrior, sure, but he was a political master. He knew how to counteract and set off people so that they wouldn't, infringe upon his position and take advantage, and eventually he'd be able to take advantage of their situation that he had created. I mean, he was just a master political manipulator. And this picture was a fucking mess. It was a fucking disaster. I mean,
the only great thing about it is Vangelis's score, but that's because Vangelis can't do bad music.
well,
So
I don't know.
he
I'm
has
not a
that
big
going.
fan of Vangelis, so I still
Yeah,
think
well,
that.
that's why you're a lesser human, but that's okay.
I still think that Vangelis in Blade Runner was a mistake, but okay.
Well,
Um,
that now I know you are a lesser human. You're a
well,
replicant. You didn't pass the Voight Comp test. Otherwise, you would have understood. Yeah, let me
clearly.
explain something to you.
Okay, explain it to me.
I couldn't because you're a replicant. You wouldn't understand these emotional nuances
My
of
mother?
Vangelis.
I'll tell you about my mother.
My mother. You find a tortoise lying in the desert on its back, but you're not helping.
Why am I not helping? No,
I
no, no,
don't know.
seriously, about Alexander. Why do you think it was so bad? I mean, I have my theories, but I want to hear your theory.
Fundamentally, honestly, the core performances are just not doing it at all. And yeah, you could talk about the script. The script is frankly unmemorable, but I wouldn't say it's bad enough to cause that. I just think, you've got guys who just really are doing stupid things. Like, for example, they play the idea that the Greeks are English, their English accents, so be it. But Stone took it to an absurd conclusion that's like, oh, well, then the Macedonians would sound Scottish. So you have Scottish Greeks and guys who aren't even Scottish doing it, like Colin Farrell is mixing Irish and Scottish accents. And then you have Val Kilmer, who's just looks like a fucking goat that got scarred in the face. And, he's doing around his Scottish thing. And, Angelina Jolie is just, I don't know, just being a little thought running around
Yeah.
as Alexander's mother, and even the tone of their voice makes the lines sound stupid and annoying. Like whenever I hear Angelina Jolie in her accent, whatever the fuck accent it was, going my little Achilles, I said, oh god, I just want to vomit now. It's the sound, the music in their voices was not on point, and
Not
it's
on
the human
point.
voices.
It was as far away from a point as can possibly
But I
be.
mean, I'm very serious about that. Like the human voice is an instrument that must be played on note, and they were just not on note. They were, misaligned instruments is the best thing I can describe it. And Oliver Stone tries to recut it all sorts of ways. It's, it doesn't help. There's like 3 or 4 cuts of the film, and I honestly say, and it's a shame, I admit it, like every few years I try to watch it again because Alexander the Great is one of the best sort of things to try and depict, and I want to like it, and I like Oliver Stone. I want to like this film. I just can't.
Why do we like him?
Alexander,
No, Oliver Stone. Why do we like Oliver Stone? Because he is so infuriating on so many levels.
because you see when you see an artist who is successful and you see flickers of good things even in bad movies, you see like, well, maybe he'll pull it off again. Maybe there's something trying to break free, like even because in the films after that they're dull, but they have their moments, like World Trade Center's, whatever.
No, that was awful.
W, which like W is like, you compare W to JFK and Nixon, and it's like this should have been the third rung of a great trilogy of American political imperial dynasties, and it just lacks all the spark
Yeah.
of the original, but it has its moments, like when I think the relationship between George Jr. and George Sr. is interesting, and there's when George is alone in the baseball stadium. Those are moments that have, it's like, okay, I can see that there's a little artistry here, but by and large the film is dull, and it's and all of his films after that get kind of dull. Like Wall Street Money Never Sleeps is very, the most memorable thing of that movie is that Oliver Stone was stupid enough to cut a scene between Donald Trump and Gordon Gekko. And even that scene, and it's not a great scene, but it's not a bad scene either. And he cuts it. And I look at this period and I think, yeah, the narrative films he's making are terrible. But what is memorable, ironically enough, and especially it's odd for me to say I like it when I know his relationship to history is so weird, it's his documentaries.
Yeah.
His interview with Fidel, his Untold History of the United States, and the Putin interviews. All three of them, I think, should see. Everybody should see them. And even like, especially in the case of Fidel Castro, I'm like, yeah, of course Fidel is trying to tell us his version of the story. But you know what? I don't care if it's true or not. I want to know what Fidel had to say about himself.
Mm.
And Oliver Stone gave him the opportunity to do so. I'm a big boy. I know when people are spinning me bullshit and when they're spinning the truth. And sometimes just when someone is spinning me bullshit, I learn a lot about them.
Yeah.
And I wanted to have that opportunity to know what the fuck was making Fidel tick, even if he was lying to me. Arguably the same thing with Putin. I mean, that's why he was a brilliant interviewer. Those people who are saying, why wasn't it an antagonistic interview? It's like, well, you would have never had that
Yeah.
intimate view of the guy if he was stupid enough to just say, oh, Putin, why are you an asshole? You're like, yeah, you're going to learn a lot about Putin at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. You learn nothing from the man. And for instance, I found the Putin interview more revelatory than the Castro interview, and perhaps it has to do with the fact that I understood Castro from way before. I didn't need Oliver Stone to tell me about it. But the Putin interview, what shocked me was to realize that Putin is a shy individual. That was shocking. That really surprised me. And you see it in the little things. You realize in little things that Putin does, that you realize that he's fundamentally an introvert, that he's an introvert and a fundamentally shy individual, shy and not particularly comfortable with new people, and yet not unfriendly. Okay,
Right.
that was shocking to realize that, because there are a few interactions. I remember that Stone was smart enough to show in the documentary, because there were scenes that sort of like broke the interview format, but
Yeah.
that were so necessary, because there's one time they're in a hockey stadium and they're talking in the seats, and they do their question and answer and blah blah blah, right? And then they break, and I think it was Stone's wife is there, and Putin greets her in English, and says some banality, but very charming, but very low key, very quiet. And you realize it was really revelatory for me to see that he was a very different guy than what you'd think. Okay, it showed him in a much more complete manner, and I think that that's one of the great things that I love about Oliver Stone, is that he is constantly looking for those little details about his characters, be they documentary or fiction films, that expand our understanding of the character. He is
Yes.
a real humanist, okay? because he's constantly interested in understanding his characters better and putting a little bit more. There's this fantastic scene in Any Given Sunday between the wife of the aging football quarterback, played by Dennis Quaid, and the role is played by, I forget her name. She was a former wife of Jim Carrey. This actress, she slips my mind. Anyway, she is the wife of the aging football quarterback, and her ego is riding on his career in a way that's extraordinary. They had this fight, and he's saying, maybe I should quit. Maybe this season should be it. And she's saying, no, you have two, possibly three more seasons in you. You're the fucking quarterback of this goddamn team. And she's just a powerhouse. And then you realize that the Dennis Quaid character, even though he's the quarterback and the star and all the rest of it, he's fundamentally a weak guy whose all his life has been told what to do. And Dennis Quaid plays it brilliantly, because Dennis Quaid, I have no idea how he is as a man, but he was astute enough as an actor to realize that he had to really underplay this. Even as he starts to raise his voice and get kind of hysterical, he's clearly outmatched by his wife. I mean, and it's a deliberate performance. You can tell it's not that he as an actor can't handle the performance. He is playing it that way. And I thought that this trivial scene that lasts, just a minute, maybe 90 seconds, it adds an indescribable amount of complexity to what is fundamentally a minor character, or two minor characters, one minor and one very minor, and yet rounds them out in a way and gives you a level of understanding. And I think that that's what we love, or I love at least, about Oliver Stone, is that every character, he explores them. And what's the tragedy is that his late career, after the year 2000, all of his characters are pancake flat, at least in his fiction films. Snowden, The Savages, which was just stupid. The Wall Street Money Never Sleeps, the W should have been fucking great. And he had a great performance from Josh Brolin. Josh Brolin is a great actor.
Like I said, W should have been on par with JFK and Nixon, and it should have completed that trilogy. And it didn't. It really had that gap. And what's funny, and you brought up a good point, and it must explain why Stone was able to get the good performances that he did during that premiere period of his career in the 90s, which was he has this a very good eye and observation capabilities.
Yeah.
Like there's a great scene, I think it's in, it's in JFK, where Tommy Lee Jones is being interviewed by our protagonist,
Oh yeah, it's Kevin Costner's character. Yeah,
Kevin Costner's
Garrison.
character.
Yeah.
And Garrison, and it's he has the sophisticated gentleman. He's like, part of the problem, the joy of having a long dining table is you have someone all the way on the other side. It's part of the the gallant, the spectacle of it all. And it's interesting, as you could tell that Garrison is starting to push him on this. Like I know this is where you're having like your fag parties and you're talking about getting the president, what have you, and he gets Tommy Lee Jones to do this thing where you only notice it if you're observant, which is Tommy Lee Jones, 99% of the facade he has is still up, but it's just that 1% of slippage, and the weakness of it all. And it's very muted, but it speaks volumes, but you have to be a director or a person who can observe it at that level to be able to communicate so well. And frankly, I wouldn't suspect that a lot of the audience would, if they were left to their own devices, not notice it. But Stone presents it in a way that you notice that 1% slippage, and it's like almost like a huge dramatic thing to see it happen. And that's a skill of an observer. That's the skill of a good director. And that's probably why he did get those good performances.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you what's happening after, 2000 that they kind of failed, other than to say like either he lost interest or maybe, and this is another thing that could have happened in Alexander. The casting was so bad that all of the efforts he took to getting a great performance was lost on these nitwits. And as a result, he's like, I don't give a shit anymore. I can't do it. He loses his mojo.
I think that can happen, that you push so hard and try so hard for something. The fact that he has re-edited that goddamn picture 3 times, That says
It's
something.
important to him. That's an important picture to him, and I
Yeah.
think it bugs him that he missed the mark.
Yeah. I mean, and he completely missed the mark. And I think that if anybody were to tell him that Any Given Sunday was one of his great pictures, I think he'd have a hissy fit, you know. And I think that that's the thing that might be happening to him, that because in Any Given Sunday there was no political axe to grind. There was no big kind of like theory that he was trying to say. He was just trying to tell a really good story about these really interesting people. And the overarching story is kind of silly. You know, it's about the young third string quarterback finally coming into his own and learning
Hmm.
some hard lessons as he becomes a new quarterback. You know, that's it. That's the basic story. It's kind of stupid. But it's all the little performances all around this picture, this enormous tableau or tableau,
Tableau.
tableau.
It's like a Robert Altman film in that regard.
Yeah, yeah. You know, actually thinking about it, the only other filmmaker that I think took some lessons was Milos Forman in. The only other filmmaker who took some lessons from Oliver Stone was Milos Forman in The People versus Larry Flint. Because there's actually, now that I think about it, there's something very Stone-esque about
Well,
that picture.
Guess what? Oliver Stone produced that picture.
Oh, he did. Really? That's interesting. Well, he probably had some control over the cut of the picture. Okay.
Could be, yeah, could very well, yeah.
Yeah, and because there's like a feel to it. I had no idea about that. Man, that's interesting. That's really
And Oliver,
interesting. So
Oliver Stone
that
produced
shows that shows that Stone has a certain stylistic something that you can
yeah.
identify, if only subliminally. You know. Ah,
It's just the other really good movie that Stone produced that I also think has a little bit of his influence, not a lot, but enough to notice. Reversal of Fortune. He produced that one too.
that's a great picture. That is
Very
a
good picture.
fucking great picture, and people don't talk about it enough. That is
Well,
a
I'll talk.
great
I'll
picture.
talk about that film. I love that film
I think so
a
too.
lot.
I love that picture. I think that that is extraordinary performances, extraordinary script. It works across the board. Everything about it works. And and Jeremy Irons is incredible, and Glenn Close is incredible, and it's just the whole fucking picture works beautifully. Even the little things work in that picture. You know. Oh,
There's so much. Well, that deserves its own episode. I think it will do that because it's so unique. And I feel like we both could talk about it. The thing I love the most, I'll summarize it this way, and you'll think it's weird for me to summarize it. I think that's the best depiction of an aristocratic gentleman I've ever seen. You know, that kind of mentality, how that
yeah.
person thinks. Absolutely.
Actually, it's one of the best descriptions of an aristocratic background, about an aristocratic, a truly aristocratic milieu. Like, for instance, Wall Street sort of like pretends to show like an upscale, but they're just nouveau riche. They're not real aristocrats. But Reversal of Fortune shows real aristocrats and how they act. Not enough about the servants, though. I wish they'd do more about servants, because there's a very odd and intimate relationship between servants and the the uh,
Yeah.
the upper classes that is rarely depicted, and I wish it would be depicted more.
So we'll leave that. I want to do that actually. That is going to be a great movie to discuss, and I think it's one of those like you want people to. It's easy for people to find it and like follow along, and it's a good little surprise if they've never heard of it.
Yeah, I don't think that it deserves a full episode. I mean, I don't think that you can talk that much about it because it doesn't have that many big ideas going on in its head. I mean, it's telling just an interesting story.
Well, I don't know. I think it's
It's a compelling picture, and the performance by the guy who plays Dershowitz, what's his name, is very good. That's a
oh
very
yeah,
very
yeah,
good.
exactly. I forget his name, but
Yeah,
yeah.
he passed away unfortunately, but that's a very good performance. And like I said, Jeremy Irons, man, he owns that fucking picture. I mean, he owns it and bitch slaps it around. I mean, it's his, right? He's just
So much for the first coma. The second one was far more theatrical.
yes, that was a great line. Yeah, when he's trying to eat the dumplings and they keep getting away from him, and that's fucking
Yeah.
funny. Yeah. Um,
Someone order me another ginger prawn.
yeah. No, but
Yeah.
like going back to Oliver Stone,
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand. Well, look, I think that his decay in this century has been because of his failure with Alexander. I think that the picture took a lot out of him. I'm looking at his timeline, right? It took him, there was basically a 5 year gap between him doing Any Given Sunday and doing Alexander. And I think what it was those 4 years were prime years in his life. He was what? Let me just see. He was born in 46, right? He was born in
Mm-hmm.
46, so he would have been between the ages of 53 and 58. Now, those are like prime years for most men. And the fact that he blew those years on a project that didn't land, I think I think that he felt that his whole career was leading up to this, and this would be his grand statement. And it just didn't fucking work. You know, those big speeches that he gave to his generals, they were just stupid. They didn't seem like they didn't work at all. And it's really
The battles were a confusing mess.
oh yeah, complete mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like you most of the time, I've rarely seen a picture that has depicted a battle well. I mean, even Apocalypse Now, when they take that point to go surfing, even that's pretty confusing. I mean, there's no real clear sense of what the hell they're doing, other than a bunch of helicopters are landing, are basically squatting on this position and blowing everybody out of it. But what can you recall offhand a battle scene that you understood it, that made sense to you visually?
Yeah, I don't know if you'd call it a battle scene, but I think Dunkirk was very well orchestrated. I knew what was going on
Yeah.
from get go. I would also say that opening storming of the beaches of Normandy
Yeah.
and Saving Private Ryan, which we've talked through before, like that should have been the movie itself. Everything else was just a dross after that.
Yeah.
Very few, admittedly, after that, and it's yeah, I can't think, and it's the nature of film, perhaps, or at least the preference for narrative at this point. When film came around, narrative about war changed away from, let's say, 100 years prior, which was top-down view. So the movements of the generals and how they orchestrated the people around them was a big deal. So they tried to make it clear because that was the point. And that after Red Badge of like courage, everybody shifts to, well, the war is chaotic, so we have to just have the some grunt, and you never really know what's going on because that's war, baby.
Yeah.
And we've never really got out of that point of view. And I think all the kind of movies, I wouldn't, to say they suffer from it is a little too harsh, but they all bear that weight
Well, they're
of
kind
the
of
Red
boring.
Badge of courage.
They're kind of boring because of it. Okay, but anyway, about Alexander, there was so many. There's so much stuff about it that was so bad, like the costume. Every costume was sparklingly clean. It just didn't make any sense. There was no sense of being lived in. It felt so theatrical.
Well, Alexander's white, military suit, I will say this, it looked like an elaborate diaper
Yeah,
at the
it
end of the
did.
day.
Yeah, but it was just so. I don't quite understand how that happened. You know, I
How did it kind of build up to like a big, oh, fuck? You know what I mean?
yeah
Oh, we made that.
yeah. How
It's,
was
yeah.
it's. I mean, I'm genuinely curious because I'm trying to understand it because I think that a lot of times I've noticed that people criticize filmmakers or artists for reaching a failure point or a failure stretch in their career or doing stuff that's kind of crappy. But often as not, there's a sense of almost glee. Oh yeah, he used to be great, but then he started fucking up. Yay us, you know. I
Yeah.
don't view it in that terms at all. I'm trying to understand because I'm interested in avoiding the pitfalls that led to that. I'm trying to understand what it was that um, that why he fell into the pit hole and why he was unable to get out. Because I
Right.
think that we can both agree that he has never made a compelling picture since Any Given Sunday. I mean, I think that that's a fair assessment, right?
But yeah, I'll give it at least this. There's a noticeable degree of deterioration.
Yeah. Now, okay. World Trade Center was it's just workmanlike, and some of the stuff was sort of stupid. Like that guy who decided that he was going to get back in uniform again right away. He was like a robot. I forget who played him. Yeah, you know,
Yeah, it's just one of those like, oh, it's one of those movies that they're trying to bank on a national tragedy. It's like it doesn't even feel like a Stone movie.
yeah, yeah.
W, I feel like for all the interesting bits of it, it never really got George Bush.
No,
You know what I
no,
mean?
no. It was
And
almost
it
like
could
trying to
have,
be a
it should
yeah.
have.
It
Yeah,
was almost trying to be a comedy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It
Well, I mean, it directly quotes a scene. He directly just rips off scenes from The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie,
oh,
and it
really?
lacks that.
Because
Yeah,
I've never seen it. I've never seen
well,
it.
so the scenes where George W. Bush, Rumsfeld, and his cabinet are in the somewhere on like the Bush Ranch, and they're like walking around in the outside, and like a sextet of them, and they can't figure out where they're going, and you're like, oh, they're lost on the road somewhere. That's a direct visual quote of the sextet from the Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie when they're just walking on a road for no apparent reason. There's in the surrealist style that's supposed to say something about the bourgeoisie, um, from the for Louis Buñuel's position. He just frankly lifts that scene and does nothing more with it than that.
Well, I because I never watched it. I've never watched that picture. Just never got around to it, I suppose. And it's interesting. So yeah, he's done a lot more documentaries, and he started doing documentaries starting in the year 2000. Maybe what happened was that he just didn't find fiction compelling anymore.
That could happen. I could buy that completely.
Yeah, and he couldn't something about it. Maybe he just got bored, you know. Because
Right.
I honestly believe, Any Given Sunday, he co-wrote the script, and that seems to be Oliver Stone's approach, and his very effective approach. He basically takes a script that's already been written and rewrites it severely, sometimes to the point of just being unrecognizable with the original source material. But that accreting material to a pre-existing script is a perfectly good way to go about creating a script. Sometimes it's better because you look at the material as something apart from yourself, and therefore you can look at it more coldly and objectively. You're not enamored of it because it doesn't feel like you didn't birth it. It's just this child that you're helping along, and so you can be much more objective about it. And so, in Any Given Sunday, he added so much interesting material to the original script, and all these little nooks and crannies insofar as each of the characters are concerned. And yet, in Alexander, equal number of characters, but they were all undifferentiated. It was just completely random and completely bizarre. God, those sex scenes with Rosario Dawson were just so fucking embarrassing. I mean, it was just embarrassing. Like, for instance, the weird Oedipal relationship with the mother, with the Angelina Jolie. Okay, on its face, that would have been really compelling and interesting. But it was just so overacted and badly acted and just badly written. It was just stupid, instead of being compelling. If it had been in Any Given Sundays, it would have been compelling, But maybe the point I'm trying to make here is that it could be that he just put too much into Alexander. It was a failure, and that happens to everybody. But he was unable to get over that failure. The fact that he re-edited the picture 3 times in 3 different versions. Isn't it more actually? Isn't it like 4 versions at this point?
I think we got up to 4. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's he failed and was never able to get over it. You know?
Mm,
And that
yeah.
happens. That happens to the best of us. Of just not being able to of having a failure that dominates your attention because you feel as if you put the best of yourself in it and it just didn't happen. You know? It could be as simple as that.
And what's so strange about that? I mean, I absolutely think he put a lot of himself into it, but what's so strange about it was how little paid off. It would, like, for example, I know you think that Heaven's Gate is in some ways a failure, but I think you would recognize there's bits of it you say, okay, I could see that creative energy
Oh
go into
yeah.
even if they're minor things. I don't really feel that with Alexander. Like, there are very, very few moments where I'm like, I can see I can see he spent 500 hours on that, and even though it was from a holistic point of view a misfire, this scene, I get it. That's where it outputted itself, but I don't see that anywhere in Alexander. It's so strange. You'd think that he would have at least hit at least one moment of it, but there's very little of it.
Well, there's a certain theatricality to the picture that at the time I watched it reminded me of Gangs of New York. I remember watching Gangs of New York and thinking that this is such a stupid movie and so incredibly wrong for Martin Scorsese. He never should have made the picture, right? Uh, and
I've come around to Gangs of New York. At the time when I watched it, I had that exact same reaction, like, what the fuck is this? And then I've revisited it recently and I felt better about it. I don't feel better about Alexander, unfortunately, even though I revisit it more than I do
yeah, yeah.
Gangs of New York.
Well, flat out and complete failures are always much more interesting than the middling hits of great artists.
Yeah.
And look, this whole conversation that we're having is posited on the premise that we both think that Oliver Stone is a great artist. And is
Yeah.
that a fair statement? Yeah. Because what I like about Oliver Stone is that, and the question I wanted for this to answer in this final block is, why do we love him so much? And I think it's because he's got the balls to go all out. Okay. And when he does go all out and it hits out of the fucking park. I mean, it really, really comes together. And there's also a sense that he was consciously trying to improve himself as an artist, to gain complete control over his craft, and not reach a certain state of calling it good and done. Because there's that sense with, for instance, somebody like Soderbergh or somebody like Michael Mann, that they reach a certain stylistic approach. Same with Fincher, for example. They reach that certain stylistic approach and they seem to say, okay, this is good enough, and we'll leave it at that. But with Oliver Stone, you never get that sense. There's always a sense that with each picture, he's just trying to push himself just a little bit more. And that makes it very exciting. And at the same time, heartbreaking when it doesn't work. Because when I saw Alexander, I was dismayed. I remember sitting in the theater, just holding my head, in agony as I watched this shit. And then I went to see it like 2 days later, all 3 fucking hours of that godforsaken picture, trying to understand, because I recognized that he was trying for something and it just didn't come together at all,
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was
And
just
I'll give
tragic.
him, yeah. And also, I'll give him this. He's an actual baby boomer filmmaker, as opposed to those who are just unfortunately lumped into baby boomers. Like Martin Scorsese's not a baby boomer.
Right?
Of the true baby boomers,
Mm-hmm.
Oliver Stone had the grandest vision in all of his films. Like, there's no other baby boomer who is really trying to the big canvas of, like, and this is why I like the films of Oliver Stone. I like the most are his. Let me try to paint you a story of America in that sort of great American novel kind of way, and maybe that's
Yeah.
why we said he's the Norman Mailer of filmmaking in part as well. They both tried to do that, and no one else ever really tried to do that. And I think in some instances he succeeded very well. That's why I say Nixon is, I think, his best film for me.
I
But
haven't seen it, and I'll watch it again, strictly on your recommendation, because I saw it decades ago. I think I saw it when it came out. And I don't think I've seen the whole thing since. I do believe I've seen pieces of it since. But it was so memorable. It was a good picture. No, well, I remember at the time thinking it was an okay picture. I liked his pictures before and after. I really liked Any Given Sunday because I think it did that. It was like the fact that there was no politicking and it was about corporatism. I think that that's what played in its favor, in the sense that he since he didn't feel compelled to add the left wing bullshit, he could just focus on the characters and corporatism, and he did it beautifully. He did a beautiful fucking job, you know, and I mean, for my money, retrospectively, I tend to think that that's the pinnacle of his career. And you say Nixon.
yeah, well, that's the one that did it most for me. I think it's he got the country right in Nixon fundamentally at that time to know what it was. Like, there's that scene where Nixon there were some protesters at the Lincoln Memorial late at night, and for whatever reason, Nixon goes to talk to them.
Right.
He says, "Oh, I'm just rapping." He has no ability to really connect with people. That's part of the joke of Nixon. But
Well, yeah, but that's
but
that's
when
that's
uh, but
historically
when
not
but when
accurate, for instance.
yeah, but when he's talking to the girl in in his discussion, she's like, you don't want the war. Everybody else doesn't want the war. Why does it still fight? And Nixon kind of a roundabout way says, there's some things you just can't control. And she says, you talk about it like it's an animal or like a monster or something. He says, yeah, maybe I am talking about that way. And then he walks away and he says, the fucking 20-year-old kid got something that took me 20 years to get and everything. That idea. That's a great scene. And he gets it. He gets it.
Well,
And he doesn't, and that was the thing that people hated him for Nixon for. He did not dismiss Nixon. He made him a tragic hero, and the left never forgave him for that.
you think so?
Oh, I know so. I know Christopher Hitchens never forgave him for it.
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
The left's obsession with Nixon, in light of what's going on with Trump, that's fucking interesting. Because
You do know that
go ahead.
Nixon wrote a letter to Trump, right, and saying there, this guy's good. I think this guy has the making of a good president. And
You're
Trump has
shitting
that.
me.
I'm not shitting you.
You're shitting me. Oh, I gotta look that up.
Yeah.
Oh man. I mean, Jesus Christ, great president and psychic? What the fuck? Because I'm coming to the conclusion that he really was a great president. Okay. Retrospectively, you start to realize the problems that he had at the time of his presidency, the way he handled them, the way he outclassed his predecessors in terms of solutions to foreign policy problems, how he was able to fix the situation, shit, the Simons deal with the Saudis. That was Nixon, even though it was concluded under Gerald Ford, but it was Nixon who realized that this was the way forward. This was the way to safeguard the American economy in perpetuity by basically turning the oil-producing countries into de facto 51st states of the United States, economically speaking. He was a fucking genius. What?
Nixon and Eisenhower were the best post-war presidents without at least thus far, without real challenge. Absolutely believe that.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Eisenhower was able to get out of Korea in a fairly dignified way that reduced the loss of life on all sides, and
he fundamentally restructured the infrastructure of the United States, which is no minor thing.
Yeah, the interstate highway.
When you and I talk about like, hey, the American car being a big thing, you can't do a car without a road, and he put the fucking roads in.
Yeah. The interstate highway, the greatest civil engineering project ever made. People forget that. But going back to Oliver Stone, I think, this little pause and this detour in the conversation before finishing up on Oliver Stone. I find him, like a lot of baby boomers, filled with promise, but I actually think he did make it. He did land the work, unlike a lot of other baby boomers. A lot of other baby boomers were all promise and they never delivered. But I think that Oliver Stone did deliver, and he delivered a number of times. And I would argue that the best pictures are JFK, NBK. You want to put Nixon in? Okay, I'll grant you that. And Any Given Sunday. I think that those pictures are as good as anything. I don't think that the pictures that he actually won Best Director Oscars for are very good. Born on the 4th of July, I thought it was a dishonest picture. When I saw it, I fucking despised it. I thought it was so fucking dishonest. And what you call it?
I agree.
And Platoon was just Oscar bait, sentimental bullshit. It was just crap. It doesn't hold a candle to the other Vietnam War movies. But what's cool about the guy is that he got his 2 Oscars, and then he kept pushing. That's the thing I like. That's why I admire him.
I felt like the Oscars to him were more of like, this is my, my permission slip to do these other movies, as opposed to like your point, the goal, like Opie, our favorite, my favorite journeyman hack. What's his face?
Ron Howard. Ron Howard, yeah.
Ron Howard's whole career was going to get that Oscar, and that's all that matters. And it's all shit after this. He, like I said, you could tell that's That's his trajectory.
Yeah. Ron Howard
Stone is more like Stone is like it's almost the beginning. Like this is my permission slip to now do the fucking wild shit I want to do.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, a very real sense that he could do anything and say, "Oh, hey, I got 2 Oscars, so I know what I'm doing," and everybody like, "Oh, okay, I guess so." And like the excuse to go for broke. Natural Born Killers would never have been made if it weren't from a 2-time Oscar-winning director. Never, no studio would have approved what he was doing on that picture. Okay, not from an expense point of view, but just of an insanity point of view, of just doing visually what he was doing. Okay, it had been too wild. I remember watching that picture in theaters, right? And I was blown the fuck away. I mean, I was just like, "Whoa, Nelly, what the fuck," right? And people were like severely divided by it. People were like, "No, this is garbage," and others were like, "This is genius." There was nobody in the middle, and that is great art. It's as simple as that. If it makes people, throw tomatoes at it, and kneel in prayer before it at the same time, then you've got art. You've made it. And so that's why I think that Oliver Stone, for all his faults, for all his historical bullshit and political nonsense, I think he's a real artist, and I think that he really made the grade.
Yeah.
I think that, like we were talking the other day about Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood made the grade with Unforgiven, $1 Million Baby, and especially Gran Torino. Yeah, I think that Oliver Stone did it too.
I think of the true baby boomers, I think only 3 of them hit masterwork status. And Oliver Stone's one of them. The only other 2, for my money, you can debate the rest at a later point, would be David Lynch and John Carpenter. Those are the only 3 who do it. Not even Spielberg. Spielberg's a technician, but he never made a great film. Never a truly great film.
He made great entertainments.
He made great entertainment, but not a master. That's not like a master of like this guy made the art. No, he's a good technician, but not an artist. There's only those 3.
Yeah, and I always find it funny that people say that Quentin Tarantino knows so much about movies and he's like a movie encyclopedia. Well, first of all, they're all encyclopedic in their knowledge of movies. All the really good ones, that's how they got good, because they knew what they were up against and they knew how to take the old shit and rework it for their particular problems, right? But I always thought that Spielberg, he is a great technician. He can deliver an incredible entertainment. He cannot deliver an art. Even that he's come close, in certain sections.
He's come very close in a few instances, but never really fully got there.
What's funny? I always think that we'll have to discuss Spielberg in another episode, because I always thought that Empire of the Sun was pretty goddamn close in many regards, and it sort of like failed at the end.
Well, I give all the credit to J.G. Ballard on that front. I mean, that's his book.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. Well, but we'll have to slide. Okay, so we're going to call it a podcast. We've been going on for an hour and 20 minutes. Huh? Well, another film director off our list of film directors. So, you want to take it out?
Any given Sunday, why don't you go watch that one?
Yeah,
I'll just randomly pick. I'll pick the one that will most placate you. Okay. You really like that one scene, so I got to make sure everybody knows what you're talking about.
Yeah. Any given, like I said, I'm going to go and see Nixon, because I haven't seen it in years, perhaps decades, and so I'll go and rewatch it. Look, those pictures, JFK, Natural Born Killers, Nixon, Any Given Sunday, and the Putin interviews. Yeah, I would suggest the Putin interviews. Which of the interviews would you prefer? I mean, which is your top interview?
You mean of the Putin interviews, or of the various people he's interviewed?
Of the various people he's interviewed.
Oh, Putin by far. Then there's no contest.
Yeah. Okay, and so with that, we bid you a fond farewell. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.